Some of these are going to feel uncomfortably specific, not in a vague, general way, in the way that makes you stop and think, wait, how did they know that? Because these are not the obvious signs, not the ones that show up in every article about childhood trauma. These are the small ones, the ones hiding inside habits you thought were just personality quirks. Things you do that you have never questioned because they have always been there. You apologize before anyone is bothered. You feel emotions hours after the moment that caused them. You laugh when you talk about painful things. You cannot explain why certain small things make you disproportionately upset. These are not random. They are connected. Connected to something that happened or something that never happened in a home you grew up in before you were old enough to understand what was being asked of you. Psychology has a name for all of this, and understanding it does not mean you are broken. It means you are finally starting to see the map of something that has been quietly running your life. Here are 11 oddly specific signs, and by the time you reach the last one, something is going to make sense that never did before. Sign 1. Your emotions arrive hours after the moment that caused them. Something happens in the morning. Someone says something that should have bothered you. A situation arises that should have made you angry. And in the moment, you are fine. You handle it. You move on. And then, hours later, sometimes the next day, something rises in you. A slow burn of anger. A wave of sadness you cannot quite place. A heaviness that has no obvious source until you trace it back. Oh, it was that. This is called emotional delay, and it is not a character flaw. It develops in children who learn very early that feelings are not safe to have in real time. In homes where emotional expression was unwelcome, or where the child had to stay focused on managing the environment around them rather than attending to their own inner world. The feelings happened, they just went underground, and they surface later when it is finally quiet enough to feel them. Your emotions are not broken. They were just trained to wait. Sign 2. You are always slightly in a hurry, even when there is no reason to be. You walk faster than the situation requires. You feel a low-grade urgency about ordinary things. Getting somewhere on time, finishing a task, responding to a message feels slightly more pressing than it probably should. And when you actually stop moving, when there is nothing to do and no reason to rush, something in you does not quite know what to do with that. The stillness feels wrong, like you should be doing something, like stopping is a risk. This is what happens when a child grows up in an environment where things could go wrong quickly, where the emotional weather was unpredictable, where staying alert was how you stayed safe. The nervous system learned that movement equals protection, and it has not yet received the message that the emergency is over. You are not anxious. You are a nervous system that learned to treat life like a situation that needed managing. And it is still doing its job, even when the job is no longer necessary. Sign 3. You have a depression you barely notice because it has always been there. Not a dramatic depression, not something that keeps you from functioning. Just a low hum underneath everything. A baseline flatness that you have lived with so long you stopped registering it as a problem. Like a refrigerator that buzzes in the background. You only notice it when someone else points it out, or when, one day, it lifts for a moment, and you realize with surprise that this is what the absence of it feels like. This develops in children who grew up in environments where sadness had nowhere to go, where the grief of small losses, a pet that died, a friendship that ended, a moment of loneliness that no one acknowledged, accumulated without being processed. Because no one was available to process it with you, the sadness did not disappear. It became the water you swim in. So familiar that you stopped calling it sadness. You called it personality. You called it just how you are. It was never just how you are. It was what happened when feeling things alone for long enough became the only option available. Sign 4. Being tired triggers something that feels like failure. You are exhausted, and instead of simply feeling tired, you feel something else underneath it. A vague unease, a sense that something is wrong, that being tired means something about you, that you should push through it, that stopping to rest is somehow a betrayal of something, though you cannot say what. For some people, exhaustion pulls them toward a sadness that seems disproportionate to how tired they actually are. This is what happens when a child grows up without being tended to around basic physical needs, when going to bed was lonely, when rest was not something that happened in safety. The body learned to associate stillness with vulnerability. And now, every time you slow down, something old surfaces. Not because you are weak, because your nervous system was trained to stay alert, and rest, however necessary, still feels like a risk it is not entirely sure you can afford. Stop here for a moment, because something needs to be said. If you are recognizing yourself in these first 4 signs, you are not broken. You are not damaged beyond repair. You are not someone who had it worse than you thought and now has to carry that weight. What you are is someone whose nervous system made remarkable adaptations to an environment that asked too much. These are not personality flaws. They are the completely predictable responses of a child who learned to survive in conditions that were not designed for thriving. The environment that created these patterns no longer exists, but the patterns remain. And understanding where they came from is the first step toward no longer being run by them without knowing it. Stay with me, because the next 7 signs are the ones most people have never seen named before. Sign 5. You laugh when you talk about painful things. You are describing something that happened to you, something that was actually hard, and without planning to, you make it funny. You add a joke. You soften it with a laugh. You watch the other person's face relax, and you feel the familiar relief of having made it easier for them. And then you walk away feeling slightly strange, like you told the truth sideways, like something real was in the room for a second, and then you helped it leave before anyone had to deal with it. This is what happens when a child grows up in a home where emotional honesty was uncomfortable for the adults, where vulnerability was met with dismissal or discomfort, where the child learned that the safest way to share something painful was to make it palatable first. You are not being dishonest when you do this. You are doing something you have always done, making yourself easier to handle, at the cost of being fully seen. Sign 6. You feel like people can see through you in public. You walk into a room, and something in you feels exposed, not because anything is visibly wrong, but because somewhere underneath the surface, you carry the sense that people can tell, that your history is visible, that whatever was chaotic or shameful or hidden about your childhood is somehow readable on your face. You are not imagining this. You are experiencing what happens when a child spends years hiding something about their home life. When the outside world felt like a place where the truth might leak out, where other people's normalcy was a constant reminder of what was different behind your door. That hypervigilance, that constant low-level monitoring of how you appear to others, did not develop because you are vain or insecure. It developed because visibility once felt genuinely unsafe. And your nervous system is still scanning, still managing, still making sure nothing shows that should not be seen. Sign 7. Small things make you unreasonably upset. You cannot find your keys. Someone changes plans at the last minute. Something small does not go the way it was supposed to, and your reaction is larger than the situation warrants. Not just frustrated, something closer to genuinely destabilized. And then, almost immediately, you are fine. But the flash of it surprised you. This is what psychologists call sideways grief. The emotional well that exists inside every person who grew up with unprocessed pain does not stay still. It moves. And when the lid loosens, even a little, even over something genuinely small, what comes out is not just about the keys. It is about everything underneath the keys that has never had a proper exit. You are not overreacting. You are someone with a very full well, and sometimes the smallest thing opens it. Sign 8. You have different versions of yourself for different people. Not just adjusting your tone for different contexts, something more fundamental than that. With certain people, you are one person. With others, someone noticeably different. And there is a part of you that keeps these worlds carefully separate. That becomes slightly uncomfortable when they might collide. When the person from one part of your life might meet the person from another. This is what develops in children who had to hide what was happening at home, who learned to compartmentalize early, who became fluent in the art of being whoever the room needed. Not because they were manipulative, because having a stable, single self felt like something they could not afford. The chameleon was a survival skill, the most elegant one you had. But it came at the cost of never quite knowing which version of yourself was the real one. And sometimes, in the quiet, that question surfaces. Who am I when no one needs me to be anything in particular? Sign 9. You freeze or go blank when attention is on you. Not just stage fright, something more specific than that. A friend asks you a slightly personal question. Someone puts you on the spot in a meeting. Someone sings happy birthday to you, and every part of you wants to disappear. The attention lands, and something in you goes somewhere else. Not shut down exactly, just briefly not there. This develops in children who learned that being the focus of adult attention was not safe, where being seen meant being scrutinized or criticized or held responsible for something, where attention from the adults in the room was something to manage, not receive. The freeze is not weakness. It is a very old protection, one that activated so many times it became automatic, and it still activates now, even when the attention being offered is warm, even when no one in the room means any harm. Your nervous system does not yet know the difference. It only knows that being seen has not always been safe. Sign 10. You have trouble crying when you should and cannot stop when you start. Some people with difficult childhoods cannot access tears at all. Even in moments where crying would be completely appropriate, they feel the emotion, something that should produce tears, and nothing comes. Just a strange dryness where the feeling should be. Others cannot regulate once they start. The tears come and do not know when to stop, because they are not just about this moment. They are about every moment that went unfelt, unpressed, unnamed. Both are the same thing, expressed differently. A system that never learned to move emotion through the body at the pace the body was designed for, because no one was there to help it learn, because the child who needed someone to sit with them in the feeling did not always have that. And so the grief either locked up or it learned no boundaries. Neither is wrong. Both make complete sense for someone who had to figure out how to feel entirely alone. Sign 11. You tell yourself you will do it when conditions are right. I will start when I feel ready. I will say something when I have more energy. I will change when things are a little more stable. The waiting has a logic to it, the same logic a child develops when the adults around them are unpredictable, when timing matters, when choosing the right moment is the difference between things going well and things going badly. You learned to wait for conditions, because acting at the wrong moment once cost you something, and your nervous system remembered. Now, as an adult, in a life where the timing no longer carries those stakes, the waiting remains. Not laziness, not fear exactly, a deeply learned caution about moving before the moment is safe. A child's wisdom, still running in an adult's life, still protecting you from dangers that are no longer there. 11 signs, none of them dramatic, all of them specific, all of them making complete sense when you understand where they came from. The emotion that arrives late, the urgency that never fully quiets, the depression so familiar you stopped calling it that, the exhaustion that feels like failure, the laughter that keeps real things from being seen, the sense of being transparent in public, the outsized reaction to small things, the different selves for different rooms, the freeze when attention lands, the grief that either locks or floods, the waiting for conditions that are finally right. These are not personality flaws. They are the signature of a child who adapted beautifully to a situation that was not designed for children, who found ways to survive that worked, who is still using those ways in a life that no longer requires them. Understanding this does not undo what happened, but it changes the story from "this is just who I am" to "this is what I learned." And what is learned can slowly be unlearned. Not all at once, not without help sometimes, but with the kind of clarity that starts when you finally see the pattern for what it is, not fate, history. Which of these 11 felt like the one you have been living your whole life without a name for? Drop it in the comments, because someone reading your words has been carrying the same thing and has never once heard it described. Until now.